Anders, and welcome. And thank you so much for joining me today. Great to have you with me.
I should say good afternoon because I'm calling in from the future, here in Sydney,
You are
Australia.
indeed, sir. How is it down under?
Aussies are heading out of the gates. I think we're accelerating out of the pandemic slowdown and coming out of the curve quite nicely. So I think, as a futurist, I have a positive outlook on the future. I certainly think that we're at the early dawn right now of the recovery, and maybe also what we've seen as a sort of early dawn of a human creativity explosion, given all the shocks that we've had, all the future shocks we had during 2020.
So let me ask you, at my opening gambit, you've always talked about digital, and I love the digital and the analog and how they combine together. Over the last year, obviously, the digitisation of the economy, of society has come to the forefront. How can we use this to reclaim our analog lives?
Well, I think, we really saw sort of, 10 years worth of digital acceleration compressed into a single year, that momentous year that was 2020, and it really was a test for various business models. I think it really sort of laid the groundwork for what is essentially a sort of a K-shaped recovery. There are businesses and entrepreneurs who are going to be on the rise, and there's certainly businesses that are going to be on the fall as part of that K-shaped recovery. And part of that is the fact that, technology has really become our lifeline to not only our digital minds, but also, very much our analog hearts. And, even laggards like my mother have now adopted new technologies. So I live in Sydney, Australia. And my mum, who lives in Stockholm, Sweden, she's adopted, finally, I must say, story time via FaceTime for my 4-year-old son. So she figures out the time zones and she reads some of the Swedish classics like Pippi Longstocking to my son via FaceTime. And I think that sort of, differentiation between what is the analog world and what is the digital world is now sort of dissipating to a degree. Yes, there's pent-up demand to go back into the analog world and to still be, socially and physically connected. But I think we've understood the value of just how good a digital experience can be. And that's not to discard the fact that, we're all, analog souls at our core.
So taking that and kind of, if we've seen that actually we're now looking at how to think differently and how to think creatively in this new environment we're living in, how do we combine the best of human resources and our analog selves with the AI in order to really kind of expand our ability to be creative?
I think, what's really happening now, and we speak about this in the context of what I call the second renaissance, which is also the title of our Vodden podcast, which is that we're really at the sort of early dawn now of a human creativity explosion. Firstly, the fact is that, pandemics have had a history, whether it's the Black Plague or the Spanish flu, of leading to huge social mobility. So in the case of the plague, for example, impacting Florence, which later became, of course, the heartland of the flourishing of human creativity, humanist thoughts, the re-rise of science, and of course, artworks that we still admire in Italy and beyond. But where the pandemic, killed off, sadly, tragically, 50% of the population, it also led to labor shortages, which then meant that when there's a shortage of something, prices go up. So the price on labor went up. And as a result, peasants became artisans. Artisans became merchants, and merchants became new noble men and women. Spanish flu led to the international suffragette movement and the much overdue vote for women. So pandemics have had a history of really leading to social mobility and new norms. And on top of that, you have the rise of technologies and the exponentiality of machine learning, artificial intelligence, which increasingly means, in terms of this human creativity explosion, that humans will be able to spend less time doing the menial and the mundane and more time doing the meaningful and the humane. So actually I think that there's a new kind of rise of humanism where, again, we're going to really focus on empathy, human connection, creativity, and spending less time punching data into spreadsheets and realizing the potentiality of technology to actually unleash our latent creativity that maybe previously was a little bit under the carpet.
Listen, I love the sound of that. And I look forward to my mind being blown with creative ways for everyone. I suppose the question that comes out of that is, and I know you've spoken about it in the past, I'm interested in the thought now, in terms of leadership in this post-COVID world, what skills are we looking for from leaders in order to allow us the freedom and the chance to exploit this newfound creativity?
So I was speaking to the Innovation Outreach Program out of the United States as an initiative by Microsoft to some of their top clients. And one of the things we spoke about there is this meme that's been floating around the internet, which is, who in your organization, quick survey, right? Who in your organization led digital transformation? Digital transformation, easy to say if you're Swedish Australian. Was it A, your CTO, your Chief Technology Officer? Was it B, your CEO? Or was it C, the CIO, Chief Information Officer? Or was it D, COVID-19? And COVID-19, in many ways, if digital disruption was the precursor or the dress rehearsal for digital transformation from a leadership perspective, certainly COVID-19 became the burning platform where we all had to really adapt at speed. And I think the lesson here for leaders moving forward is once that burning platform sort of dissipates to a degree through vaccinations and new social behaviors and norms, how do they tell a better science fiction story for the future? Because really strategy and digital transformation is just a science fiction story. It's about how we move from the present moment, from the here and now, and how we win the both analog hearts and digital minds, hopefully, of our talent for the odyssey into the future that we're about to embark on. So I think the leadership lesson here is how do we actually tell a really compelling story around change and transformation that's believable and that people want to go on for the future. I mean, in many ways, COVID-19 was just the biggest and fastest human behavioral change program at scale ever unleashed. And we're going to have to keep the momentum up if we also want to make sure that we compete with the machines in the future as well.
Well, it's a scary thought for all of us. We'll get busy on that one. Taking that thought, give me a couple of questions or one question that every business should be asking themselves in order to become more competitive or to make sure they're ahead of the game now.
One of my favorite questions as a futurist is always to engage in the concept of doing a pre-mortem as opposed to a post-mortem. Post-mortem is a little bit too late, and they're never good to be Harry hindsight. It's always better to be Frida foresight, right? So a pre-mortem question might run something like this. So imagine a point in the future, to think a little bit like a science fiction author for business. So say 2025 or 2030. So imagine it's now 2025, and on your watch, your company went belly up. Then just ponder, what were the future trends that you just missed? What were the future signals that you deliberately chose to just ignore? And what were the investment decisions, either in yourself or in your organization, that you just delayed, kicking the can down the road, as it were, that led to that demise? And instead, what change will you make today to prevent that from happening?
That got me thinking as you were speaking. Last question, please.
I was going to say, and another really good one, Nick, is what would our competition not want us to do next?
Yes. AI, digitization, which emerging markets do you think are next to be massively hit?
My prediction, my forecast is that in many ways, AI, machine learning will do to white collar jobs what robots and machines have been doing to blue collar work. So increasing, not only are our brawns being digitized and upended, but increasingly also our brains. And so certainly there's going to be some cognitive, both replacement, but also augmentation, again, leading to this, future creativity explosion by humans. Now, humans get really freaked out, and professionals should freak out a little bit, but it's also a call to arms to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and figure out what we're really strong at. And increasingly, those skills that are going to be in demand are on the right side of the brain. So creativity, emotional intelligence, innovation, creativity, interpersonal skills, fundamentally kind of human skills that are not so STEM-based, because of course the machines and AI will increasingly excel at the logic, the mathematics, the processing, the big data analytics. So increasingly, as humans, we're going to have to become a little bit more whole brain, not just left brain or right brain, but increasingly be confident across the whole cognitive spectrum. So I think that's the opportunity for all of us. And also as leaders, we have to make sure that we curate teams that are truly cognitively diverse. If previously we've over-indexed towards logic and mathematics, we have to make sure that our teams are not just gender and ethnically and racially, culturally diverse, but also that they're cognitively diverse. And in fact, the research bears out that organizations that are more cognitively diverse are also more innovative, which we truly need in this pandemic curve as we accelerate out of it. But also that those companies that are more diverse have more revenue from new products than organizations who are less diverse. So there's a huge opportunity here, and organizations have to realize from a leadership perspective that if they're not diverse, they're probably paying a penalty, a revenue penalty for not being so.
And Sörman Nilsson, as always, it's been an honor and pleasure listening to you, and got my brain thinking. And thank you so much for your time. I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you, Nick.